Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the weekly IMA webinar, the weekly IMA show. I'm Dr. Ryan Cole, Senior Fellow with the IMA. And, well, unless you've been living under a rock, there is a lot happening right now. I know some of you may be aware of it, and if not, well, buckle your seatbelt because we're going to be going over quite a bit of information tonight. And you know, since we're covering so many topics tonight, afterwards there will be an X Space being held and directed by Dr. Lindley and Dr. Fynn, my guests tonight. So you're certainly welcome to continue the conversation with us there. So, you know, what is happening? Well, in the FDA news, we have a new mRNA flu shot that's been approved, a Moderna shot. And major changes have happened with an executive order around the childhood vaccine schedule. And if you're into the drama side of things, we continue to get to follow the musings of Anthony Fauci and his messages from his phone, his text, and certainly his diary. I know many of you have followed these issues fairly closely, so we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of these newer developments and hopefully bring some clarity to our understanding of what's happening. I'm joined by two of my great friends and wonderful fellows tonight, Dr. Kat Lindley and Dr. Lynn Fynn. Dr. Katerina Lindley is our director of the fellowship at the IMA, as well as a senior fellow in family medicine. She's a board certified family physician and the owner of Lindley Medical, as well as the co-founder of the Global Health Project and a fellow of the American College of Osteopathic Family Physicians. I hope I got all that in there, Kat. And then my colleague, Dr. Lynn Fynn, is an IMA senior fellow in infectious disease. She's a retired infectious disease specialist, now focused on clinical research, which I know I'm not allowed to say a whole lot, which is pretty cool research. So her work includes novel therapeutic formulations and research into mechanisms involving the sympathetic nervous system. So great to have you both here tonight. And it's good to be back from some travels so we can talk about pretty interesting upside down world. So let's start with the mRNA stuff. Flu shot. What should we be asking right now? Our audience obviously knows the evolution of mRNA over the last couple of years, how it was used during the COVID era. Sorry, I'm still getting my brain back onto US time here. But we've got some useful conversations that need to be had. This raises a whole lot of questions because now this goes into a shot that historically has been used in annual injection programs, repeated annual exposures. We're going to dig into biodistribution, persistence, immune activation, repeated dosing, long-term surveillance, and I may bring in some nerdy pathology. So, let's start with that. Let's start with you, Dr. Lindley. I mean, you run a family practice, and you.
Oh my God, you should go with
Lynn. Why not? Come on.
Okay,
you're going to get the question from your patients. Hey, Dr. Lindley, what about this year's flu shot? So, what are your thoughts on the FDA putting a stamp of approval on an mRNA injection for influenza?
I'm going to leave the technical stuff to you and Lynn.
Okay, fair enough.
That's your field. You guys love that. Well, I think the important thing to know is they put it on a shelf. They weren't going to review it. All of a sudden, a month after, we had some people leave the HHS, FDA, and other departments. This vaccine. This mRNA product, as I like to call it, has been approved. Have you learned anything? I don't think so, right? Because we already struggled with the COVID mRNA shot and everything that we're seeing with that, and now we're going to do the flu. The alarming thing is this is seasonal, it's going to be every year. The good thing is it may be approved, but it's still not available, and it's not going to be available anytime soon. I would say from perspective of my patients, when they are offered this at their specialist offices or pharmacies and they decide to go with the flu shot, they should ask the question, which one am I getting? I think, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, because you know I'm terrible with percentages, but last year flu shot was only like 13% effective, right?
It was very low last year. And
Yeah.
It was
negatively
effective.
Yeah, it was
You had
negative.
12% more chance of getting a flu than not if you got the flu shot.
And
And-
since our brainiac is here, Lynn, she'll tell you this one, didn't they call it, Lynn, superior?
Oh yeah, they have interesting ways of determining superiority.
Yeah. Why don't you share the numbers that they base superiority on?
Well, I mean, basically their efficacy claim is that 26.6% relative efficacy with the Moderna shot. But to frame it honestly, it means going from 2.8% to 2% of participants getting confirmed flu. So what that means in real numbers, and to you and me, is 0.8 percentage point absolute difference between that flu shot and the previous flu shot, which is statistically insignificant, and a marked double plus observation of AEs in this versus the older flu shots. And please understand the key point here. AEs were observed for 14 days via diary. So after 14 days, no more AEs were added to surveillance, and it was a diary discussion, so it was subjective to the recipient.
Well, and kind of to that point, they compared it to another flu shot. They didn't even do a placebo-controlled trial.
That's probably has something to do with Dr. Fauci's wife and the ethics involved, because somewhere along the line they made it unethical to use a saline cohort when you're doing a study where an existing therapeutic that they deem is efficacious exists. So like we were just discussing, Kat, last year you were 12% more likely to get the flu if you got the flu shot. That's negatively efficacious. So how would using a saline cohort be unethical instead of using a flu shot that is negatively efficacious?
Wait,
I
whatever
don't
you
know the
do,
answer.
don't ask common sense questions. That's not allowed in this day and age.
I just don't understand it.
Well, and to your point, the AEs, adverse events, were off the charts with this, and yet it still got a stamp of approval.
Well, and the thing is with that is I've spoken personally with 3 former FDA officials who looked at the initial information that was submitted by Moderna, and they decided not to even review it. And they said it was not robust enough, it was not designed correctly, and they're not going to even review it. And that was in February. So no new information was provided, no new studies were done. They fired the 3 of them or forced them out. And now it is approved for 50 and over.
And correct, yeah, and that's a good point. It's for age 50 and over at this point, but as we know in medicine, there's a slippery slope, and then it ends up getting pushed into younger age groups. And correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't there a large donation made by a certain company to a government entity or something to that effect?
Oh, sure.
And
That
then,
always happens, but don't worry, it goes to the foundation arm.
okay, yeah,
Yeah, we're going towards
Same bank,
midterms,
different
aren't we?
account.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah. I was
And the big concern is the long-term safety data, right? we're seeing years after we introduced COVID mRNA shot that we're still seeing adverse events. We have no idea what type of long-term side effects we're going to have. We have some ideas, but it's like they're trying to say it's not. But this one, we have nothing. 14-day diary. And
Well,
they say it's safe and let's give it to 50 and up, our vulnerable population, 65 and over are going to start getting it. And then the question is going to be when we start seeing deaths, oh, was it a bad flu
It
season
was
or
a
was
bad
it
flu
this
season.
new? Exactly. So it's like they're playing with people's lives based on data they don't have and introducing new things just because it makes a lot of money. It's a very easy to produce, and they don't have to really wait long time to get something on the market.
and we have no evidence that they've changed the manufacturing process, so there's still the chance of carryover of the DNA template blueprint from the vats of E. coli bacteria. Basically, they're growing it in poop bacteria and in little circles of DNA, using that as a blueprint template, and then making mRNA. But we have no evidence they've cleaned up their processes. So the chance of getting DNA in the final product, they haven't proven that these are pure mRNA. We already know that the lipid nanoparticle in and of itself, and Dr. Finn's done some phenomenal presentations on the lipid nanoparticle. So we know the risks of just the little bubble that this genetic material is carried in. Even if you didn't have a sequence of any sort in the middle of that little bubble is high risk in and of itself. And, here we are again. And Dr. Lindley brings up the great point that we have a diary. Oh, dear diary, my arm hurts. Oh, dear diary, I had a heart attack. Oh, dear diary. But we know that, it's a genetic product again, and those adverse events are going to show up at week 8, at week 12, at month 3, at month 4, at month, 24, and they'll never get ascribed to the shot itself. Then you'll get the false claim in the medical literature that, oh, see, it was just fine, no problem. So
Yeah, I'd
again,
really like to quote Kariko, who actually developed this whole platform and won a Nobel Prize. Back before the rollout of the COVID shot, she said, I would like to say that messenger RNA is better suited for diseases where the treatment is for short duration, it's sufficiently curative. Okay, so we're talking about terminal patients, not the healthy population. So the toxicities caused by the delivery material is less likely to occur. She said this, and she was vice president at BioNTech at the time. She knows, as well as anybody who is involved in this type of platform, that the delivery cationic LNPs, among other things, are cumulative. And we're already, I know we're saying that this is a seasonal shot, so blah, blah, blah. Well, so they made COVID a seasonal shot. If you haven't noticed, get your updated COVID vaccine. So we're talking about LNPs upon LNPs upon LNPs. To what end? Nothing good can come from this. Nothing. And we're
no.
going to be adding other things. We already have the mRESVIA. And remember, when we were talking about the RSV vaccine that they made into a gene product like this, they followed the AEs for 7 days. And they were almost all reported AEs from mild to moderate to severe. So the red flags are there. And I believe Vinay Prasad knew the red flags were there, which is why
Sure.
he refused to review what was submitted. And here we are right now. And like Kat brought up, we're lucky that it's not going to really be on the shelves in the fall yet, because Judge Murphy has a ruling against the ACIP committee, and without the ACIP stamp of approval and the CDC recommendations, no insurance company is going to distribute and cover this shot. So I think that's an unintended consequence that Judge Murphy placed on this situation, and the AAP, among other things, that they're holding up the works for this so-called therapeutic. But again, we're dealing with the same type of AEs. It's using 3 different strains of hemagglutinin for the target protein, which is not great. we're once again, we're programming our healthy cells to produce a foreign protein in our body. Why are we doing this?
You just took the words out of my mouth. You know, human cells are meant to make human proteins. And from a pathology point of view, again, you know, we can develop new stains to look for hemagglutinin within human cells now because you're going to find it. And it's not going to stay in the arm. We all know that. It's going to biodistribute to the ovaries, to the bone marrow, to the liver, to the brain, to the spleen. It's going to go everywhere. It's going to go to the heart. It's going to induce inflammation. And here we are, you know, COVID shot 2.0, but it's now a flu shot 1.0, which will end up being flu shot 2.0, 3.0, 5.0, because
But Ryan, can you imagine the mess for someone who is told by their doctor to take COVID shot and the mRNA flu shot?
And
Can you imagine?
RSV and RSV.
Oh, yes, there you go. 3 different mRNA shots. And it's like,
there's,
start praying now. Nothing's going to happen.
I mean, at this point in time, if any clinician, any physician, any provider of any sort recommends any of these mRNA products, I mean, to me, it's malpractice. I mean, there's the data is there. The unfortunate outcomes that we've seen continue, and to allow this type of product onto humanity is inhumane.
You know, and the other thing is the FDA did is they went ahead and approved this for 50 and up, and they're doing post-market surveillance for
Which,
serious adverse events, Guillain-Barré, myocarditis, all the things we know are going to happen.
But Lynn, didn't they take the myocarditis warning out of the
until the post-marketing
okay.
information is brought forth. But, you know, there's something called the precautionary principle that has been thrown out the window in 2020.
no doubt.
All of these things we know. We know the LNPs are inflammatory. We know the spike protein in the first thing was the worst thing to target to be produced in your body. We know that now 3 strains of hemagglutinins are going to be produced in your body. We know all these things, but yet they're going to go ahead and approve it for 50 and up, and then just give us the information later. Still, we're at 5 years, no carcinogenic studies, no teratogenic studies. Here we are.
These are gene products being approved under a vaccine protocol.
Correct.
And all those long-term outcomes, Section 13.1 in all vaccines, this product has not been tested for teratogenicity, genotoxicity, reproductive harms. And here we are again.
Here we are.
All right, let's shift gears, you know, on that positive note. Yikes. We had an executive order come out this past week that tries to align what we're doing with the vaccine schedule here in America with other developed nations. So, yeah, let's just start simply on that. What happened, and what does it mean, and what impact will it have, or will it have an impact, I guess, is more of the question.
I don't know if it's going to have an impact, and I'll tell you why. Pediatricians still listen to the guidance of the AAP, and they will. And
who funds the AAP? Just to be clear, the American Academy,
Pfizer,
Moderna, Eli
Merck,
Lilly,
Sanofi,
Merck, GSK. Come on, we know who funds it. So they're going to do as they're directed. So we don't know what kind of real effect that this directive will have. And if you saw any of the posts by Dr. Cassidy, Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, it was sort of refreshing to see that his entire thread was, of course, he turned off the replies, but his entire thread was a complete ratio of everyone under the sun just slamming him. But the real effect that such an EO would have would be to just suspend the Vaccine Indemnity Act of 1986. If you did that, the product would have to stand on its merits. It's that simple. We wouldn't have to do all this crazy stuff. Have to stand on its merits.
So, I mean, okay, so for those who may have been like on vacation and haven't heard what's happened. So basically, the childhood schedule went from covering 18 diseases down to 11 diseases, which means a lot fewer injections for the children. And the
And the
recommendations
spacing out.
and spacing them out like they do in our peer nations over in Europe, in many of the peer nations. So, Dr. Lindley, a patient or a mom comes to you saying, well, it's school time, which it is. You know, a lot of schools are starting now. You know, the schools in certain states, there are certain states that pressure parents and say, well, your kid can't go to school unless you get these shots. So what does this mean as a family doc, Dr. Lindley, in terms of, you know, what you recommend to the parents, or how much of a door does this open for them to have options?
So I'm going to be a little bit more optimistic than Lynn because I see her posts on X. We interact quite often. Okay, so you have a president who, you know, we were told that he's not going to touch the vaccines. The polling says to stay away from it, and he didn't. He decided to tackle this issue because there is concern of autism and vaccines and adjuvants and things like that. So the good thing is, like you guys said, we're going to have a little bit more narrow universal recommendation, changing how they're going to be administered, timing and sequencing. They're going to start doing studies. I believe they have like 90 days to come up with the actual recommendations on timing and sequences. They're going to start looking at the adjuvants themselves and see what are the side effects and issues. And then he's putting pressure on the from the federal agencies onto the states. And this is kind of where that big work is going to have to be done. In state of Texas, we have exemptions. You can go on the state website, you can get an exemption. You don't even need the doctor's approval anymore. Parents can just go and opt out if they don't want to have vaccines for their children. You have California, where essentially you cannot get exemptions. Even if a child has a true medical exemption, the doctors are allowed to give 2 exemptions a year. After that, they are being scrutinized for every exemption that they do give. So the executive orders does give a little bit leeway to attorney generals to start looking into this, and then to start putting pressure on the states, because we all know that most vaccines are actually paid by Medicaid. Some Medicare, but in childhood vaccines is usually Medicaids. So, you know, that's good. You know, he also put the directions that measles, mumps, and rubella need to be given separately if that's what parents choose. We talked about spacing out. You have a lot of children who maybe are underweight and parents are concerned, should they give them all these vaccines? But ultimately, this is a conversation that patients have to have with their doctors. And I do agree with Lynn. I actually watched a interview by Paul Offit, and he said this doesn't matter because pediatricians are going to use the AAP guidelines. The AAP guidelines still recommend all of the vaccines. That's true, except it's not. Because at the end of the day, patient is in charge. And if they start leaving pediatricians' offices more and more and more,
Yeah, I agree.
they're going to have to change their practices. And AAP, be damned, they're not going to follow it if they're losing patients, because that's how they make their money.
Well,
And
that's where parents have to make that decision. You know what?
exactly.
You're not giving me a choice, so I'm using my choice and I'm leaving this practice. And we've had multiple discussions, the 3 of us, on this very thing. And you know, I'm not saying anything bad about the EO. It's all good, believe me. But again, it's an EO that can be reversed with the next administration, whoever that is. It's until we get Congress involved in repealing that Indemnity Act, until we get Congress involved in actually sending funds to the proper studies that need to happen, where Offit says, you know, there's no ceiling on how many you can get in one sitting. Based on what?
Right. Yeah, the research.
Well, they only did that because the parents were not coming, right? So they invented this wellness visit, and wellness visit does have good practices because you do need to monitor the child, make sure that they're, you know, gaining weight, that they're getting all of their
metrics.
Exactly. So that's good. But then they combined vaccines into these wellness visits, and they combined the vaccines not because they had research behind it. They
No.
did it because parents were not coming back as often.
Mhm.
And I don't
Giving the
know.
six at once, right?
Exactly. And I have 5 kids. So when it was time to vaccinate all of them, because I vaccinated my kids, like if you were going to cancel, they wouldn't let me bring all of them 5 together because they were afraid that like if I cancel one, none of us are going to come. It's a big revenue thing. So they combine all of these vaccines, but they never had really data to say you could do them all at the same time. And I agree with Lynn. EO is not great, but it's best that we can get.
Right.
It's a definitely step in the right direction. They want to look at all of these things. They're going to actually do research to see of timing. Do we combine some of them? Do we not? Do we separate them? So, I think it's the best that we can get.
Yep.
And it's time that we actually start doing something and align more with parents' wishes and not what AAP. Like we said, AAP is sponsored by pharma.
Yeah,
No kidding, they're going to recommend all of those shots.
yeah, but you're going to see, because of the fact that we're looking into the adjuvants only and what kind of issues that they produce, and because of the fact that we're looking into combinations versus by themselves, and all of this information, you're going to see your typical talking heads, and I've already seen it happen. They are completely slamming this. They're using these generalizations. It's so anti-science. I'm sorry. How? What we're suggesting is science. What you're suggesting is put a bag over your head and just do as you're told. That's not science.
Yeah, they're suggesting a blind cult following, but I do think it opens the opportunity for us to have these conversations. And if you follow those news stations and you follow those talking heads, look, those doctors are getting paid. When we go on these different news stations, how many of us are getting paid to go on the news stations? We're not.
Zero.
We're doing it because we believe in humanity, we believe in the health, the autonomy, informed consent for the patient and on behalf of the patient. So I agree with Dr. Lindley. It's a step in the right direction. And imagine, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, we never would have even been in the news having this conversation.
No.
So the fact that it's in the zeitgeist, I think, is a great step. I think, you'll hear the media say, well, the vaccine hesitant, and all the labels and epithets they want to throw at thinking people are being, raised from the dead again. Here we are getting labeled again. Wonderful. Label me all you want, but invite us to a conversation. Let's have the scientific debate publicly and let people decide for themselves.
Yeah, just
And
change the wording. You're vaccine discernible. You're someone who is doing the right thing, asking the right question, and taking responsibility for your family.
Absolutely. Okay.
and
So,
Ryan, just one more point. We can't forget that these vaccines have not been studied against placebo either.
No.
correct.
So all of their claims of safety are not really true, because they cannot claim safety if you haven't studied something as the placebo.
It's
And
all a
again, that goes
smokescreen.
back to
So
what they're calling ethical versus non-ethical. They're saying because there's a last year's shot, blah, 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 it's unethical to let a group go without. When I'm here to tell you that you have something when you're in a study, when you enroll in a study, you have a complete informed consent written for a fifth grader. And if you agree to the risk involved, which there isn't any, but if you agree to the risk of possibly getting saline instead of a vaccine in this study, then that should be it. It shouldn't be a discussion. It shouldn't be for an ethics board. It shouldn't be for a pharma-backed agency to say it's the right thing or not the right thing. You don't know what that shot does unless you do it in comparison to a placebo. And I don't mean an adjuvant by itself. I mean saline.
And this brings up again that valid point. Ask them the question. Based on what? Based on what are you making your conclusions? And you both brought up that perfect point of these weren't tested against placebo. You can't tell me what the risks are and are not based on that. So, plant the question, plant the seed of questions in their head. And then the other thing that this brings about is the comparison to peer nations in the West. And we have a senior fellow, Dr. Vibeke Manish, who's done some phenomenal work on epidemiology in Europe. So, I mean, what outcomes should we actually be comparing between some of the nations that do have a more spread out schedule and fewer shots? You know, why are their children healthier, and what metrics should we be looking at compared to, you know, the bad health outcomes we have here in America? What's our end goal here with this EO?
Well, I think what we have to look at is actual incidence for hospitalizations, right? What is the true incidence of these diseases, and then what are we really preventing it? Or are we just saying we are because we've been indoctrinated to say so? What
Right.
is the overall infant and child mortality and morbidities that are attributable to these pathogens? You know, we had these outbreaks of measles and things like that. How many have come from immigrants that came across the border
Most.
from other countries, right? We never actually looked at the sources of this. We just say, oh, there is now vaccine hesitancy because of MAHA and all this. So this is the reasons for outbreaks. So let's scare everyone to get back to vaccinating. But then we really look at was that coming from a different source, right? And then
Well,
what
it's
are the
funny you
chronic
said that.
conditions?
It's funny you
Go
say
ahead.
that because we did have porous borders and they did bring it in. And if you're so confident about your vaccine, you shouldn't have gotten it, right? Because, you know, you're protected. And they had, like, for example, in North Carolina, they had or is it South Carolina? They had a big vaccine campaign for measles. And that was in October, I believe, of last year. And then they subsequently had an outbreak of measles, and the strain was the vaccine strain.
Mm-hmm.
So no one's asking the real questions and doing the real work that's required. Is it from the border? Is it a vaccine strain that's actually out? No, it's the vaccine hesitant RFK Jr., blah, 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 maha.
Right.
That's where we are.
Well, and instead of saying, well, gosh, look, European children have fewer chronic diseases than American children.
Exactly.
What's different? Well, that's a great question. And when you look at the fewer toxins they have in many European nations, the fewer injections they have in European nations, well, gosh, look at the Amish in our own nation. You know,
Yeah.
much healthier children than the rest of American children. So I think the question becomes a very simple one. Hey, why are these other children healthier than the average American child? And what are the things that common sense should say we should look at? So again, this EO is a step in the right direction. And, you know, let's ask for real science to be done, which I think is, you know, I applaud that direction and that move. So let's
And who
be
doesn't want that, right, Ryan? It's like it's
right.
such a
Those that are
crazy.
part of a cult.
Yeah.
When it's a
I
cult
know.
mind, they want you to just shut up.
Who doesn't want a healthy child? We all want healthy children.
Yeah.
So what are the things we can, and to your point, you know, Dr. Lindley, we're not having mass hospitalizations for all these
Childhood diseases.
childhood diseases that aren't really rampant anymore like they were 100 years ago.
We also have antibiotics and we have treatments and we have better
An immune
diet.
system.
We
And
have
an
an
immune
immune
system, if
system.
you augment it.
Where modern medicine should look more toward treating the diseases rather than trying to prevent them in the healthy masses. I think that's where your risk benefit ratio is thrown off.
Right.
So I have an idea. How about we all put a bubble around us, right? And then we just keep on injecting to prevent, maybe there is a pollution in the air from those wildfires. Why don't we invent a vaccine against that, right?
Yeah.
You cannot live your life that way. You cannot live in a bubble. You cannot have a vaccine to protect you from life. What you need to do is to normal practices that our grandparents taught us.
That's right.
Playing in dirt when you're a child is not really that bad.
No.
Eating a little bit of dirt and swallow it with just wash it off with some water, you'll survive. Tomorrow you might have an upset stomach, but again,
Yeah.
you're going
Well,
to create a great biome.
Yeah.
Well, you
But
brought
we
up a
don't.
good point, though, the bubble thing. I think a lot of concern, and rightfully so, is that okay, now they've approved another mRNA, so now we have three that are probably using process two, that are probably contaminated. God only knows. We don't know these things, right? Because money's not going toward the right things. But okay, so they decide to get this. We should be fine with that. You'd make your own decisions, right? We'll make it available for everybody. But the fact is, those of us who made the decision not to get it are also at risk. And that is where the ethics should come into this discussion.
Well, we know pertussis sheds and puts, elderly at risk. So
So does shingles and
so do shingles.
chickenpox.
So
And
do the mRNA shots. So,
yes,
it's not just a, hey, put into your body whatever you want. That's fine. Leave the rest of us alone.
they are
It's
biologically active substances.
you're a bioreactor, spreading potentially toxic bioreactive material to other people.
Right.
And I think that's where the ethics really do come into the equation. And yeah, it brings up a lot of questions. And then you have to question the science, quote, the science. So let's shift to the science.
Doctor science, right?
The
No,
science.
the
Doctor
science.
the
Just the
science.
science.
Because we know that the science, recently wrote some diaries, which we've covered, and Mr. The Science has been outed, with now his phone messages being obtained by, two of the most tenacious senators we've had in history, Dr. Rand Paul and Dr. Rand Paul, yes, and then
Yes, and Senator Ron Johnson.
Senator Ron Johnson. And they've done phenomenal work saying, look, we're going to get to the bottom of this. And so now we have some of the text messages of behind the scenes versus what was being stated publicly from Anthony Fauci and colleagues. So
If
again,
only we could get the burner phone, though. That's
I
where
know.
the real stuff is.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's enough to know that they were recognizing early on from the diaries. They knew that the COVID shots weren't working, and then they continued on to mandates. They knew they weren't working. They knew they weren't, going to cover the Delta variant. They knew that it had failed already, and proceeded to mandates. They also knew that there were potential risks in pregnancy. And for those of you who haven't heard that news, do either of you want to cover what was revealed in those text messages?
Well, he was warned in a text message of concern of the mRNA being transferred through the placenta to the fetus, causing inflammation. I mean, we all have to remember pregnancy itself is an inflammatory state. Bringing in other inflammation during that inflammatory state can cause high fevers in the fetus. It can cause a whole ball of wax that you don't want to get involved with. And he was warned in text about all of this. And he actually, which was shocking, a broken clock is right twice. Even Rochelle Walensky appeared to have some reservation over the shot in pregnancy. But in Fauci's emails, he agreed that there was some concern at the same time, chronologically, that he told Rochelle Walensky, you will say that pregnant women need it, and we will tell everybody that it's safe and effective during pregnancy. And that's where his supporters who want us to stop with all of this don't come out and say, wait a minute, that's not right.
Well,
Those
even Walensky was calling these genetic products in her
well, correct.
communications. And then even Vivek Murthy, who was the Surgeon General at the time, was saying, hey, there's a chance of, genetic mutation with these in pregnancy.
Yeah.
And so behind the scenes, they have all these concerns, and then they go to the podium and say, oh, there's no red flags, all good.
Yep. That's
But how can they live with themselves? That's
don't
really
know.
the question. Even Rochelle Walensky, right? She's a female physician, head of CDC. She has questions about this being an issue in pregnancy. We do not recommend cheese in pregnancy,
Exactly.
fish. You cannot have sushi.
Right.
You can't have a lot of stuff, but even knowing that there are questions about the extent of damage you can do in pregnancy, they still said it's safe. And and now we know that they had questions about it. They know it wasn't safe,
Mhm.
but ACOG is still recommending it.
Oh,
What about
yes, they
ACOG
are.
right now?
ACOG
Right?
also gets supported by the same people that AAP gets supported by,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, and
The
remember that these, ACOG, American College of Obstetrics Gynecology, American Academy of Pediatrics, these are trade organizations. These aren't professional organizations. These are trade organizations representing the interest of the people with the boarded specialties within their boards. And they're getting tons of money from these large pharmaceutical vaccine companies and then making a recommendation. I mean, if that's not the fox guarding the hen house and conflict of interest, nothing is. So, and then who gets all their money from pharmacy or pharma? The media does. So you're not going to hear an alternate point of view unless you're on alternate media or alternate social media. So people get confused. And so with all this confusion, what's happened to public health? Obviously, it's been destroyed in the last couple of years, and now we see why. Because now we see behind the curtain,
Mhm.
and we see the real Wizard of Oz is not a real wizard, and we see that their own debates and their own communications behind the curtain are like, "Hey, we got problems here. Oh, just lie to the people. That's okay. We'll just lie to the people, and
Well,
then we'll wonder why we lost trust in public health and science."
well, in his opinion, the trust is lost because of Republicans.
Well, they make it a political issue, and it should.
They've made it a political issue. That is why the trust is lost. Because if you notice, our people, and he said that, our people are really who we have to please. But, Rochelle Walensky has gone way back with Fauci during HIV, and she knows the drill. She's not going to say anything against him. If she knew it was dangerous, and I'm sure she did, they are gene products. And he said, no, they're safe and effective. We're going to tell our presser's going to be on pregnancy, and she does it. That's a typical, that's the typical
But
agencies now. That's where we are with our public agencies. So that's where the trust is lost. People got
but
a view into this.
But this is where you go after Rochelle Walensky. You go after
Absolutely.
her. You go after Collins. You go even after
Colin,
Redfield.
And
yes,
All of them because they knew it. They
they
don't have a
knew.
pardon. Why can't we go after them? Why can't they come into the committee and testify and be impeached and actually have consequences? Because this is the thing, you all know I love X. I love going on spaces, and I go in a lot of different spaces, not only health related spaces. And people are tired of discussing COVID and the pandemic, right? They're tired. And I get it. We're kind of past it, but we're really not. We
No.
have other things to worry about, the economy, all of these things happening in the United States, but you cannot get past COVID
You can't
because
because look at
we
look
just,
at what we're doing with
exactly,
this flu shot now. This is all
exactly.
based on that foundation, and that foundation is very shaky, and we have yet to uncover just how shaky it is. And this is going to easily happen again in the future.
Well, we got a few minutes left till you gals open that X space, and again, everybody's welcome to join us there. This kind of brings it to, people don't want to relitigate COVID. I get that. People kind of want to move beyond, hey, pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine, all the labeling. So, product-specific concerns are certainly out there, age-specific concerns, evidence concerns. What do we do? I mean, how do we push this into a more positive direction of, perhaps independent surveillance or obviously accountability? I can't agree more with you, Kat, because there are people that can be held accountable. How do we move forward? How do we restructure? You're obviously doing one thing that can help, and that's being a direct primary care provider. But what are other things we can do to give hope or direction for something better than, just slinging mud at the wall, getting angry? What are the positive directions we can head with all of this?
Well, you have to take personal responsibility first and make sure that you're doing everything you can right at home when it comes to your health, your finances, your education for your children and things like that. And then when you kind of have your ducks in a row at home, then consider getting involved on your local level, state level. This is really where meat of this whole thing is, state level. You know, these elections count because these are the officials that are making these decisions. The reason COVID is still an issue because we are one election away from having change in leadership where we can have another pandemic and again, you know, the emergency use authorizations of new products, getting back into the World Health Organization. So there is so much going on, but it always starts at home, starts with you, starts with your family. Um, and it's difficult, you know, without getting political, we all worry about the security of our elections, right? And
Yeah.
that's why I say you need to get involved at home and within your own community to kind of try to make a change. You know, grow your own vegetables. I'm still not there because I kill everything in sight, but I really, I really like wish I could, and I'm going to try. But like, I even let the flowers die in my yard, so I don't have hope.
I'm the opposite.
Yeah.
Well, I want to add to that, Kat, because yes, personal responsibility is key. But from our government standpoint, we put in so much tax money into the robustness, completion of our agencies. Presently, we have something called surveillance dysfunction. Our surveillance systems are literally designed to hide AEs and mask them. They're designed to make things look better than they are. And until we address this dysfunction and change it accordingly, we're not going to know in the future. And that's part of getting trust back as well.
And
Having a
how do we reform that, Dr. Finn? How do we, put a better surveillance system in place? What would
well,
that
it was
look like?
designed purposefully to be faulty. We need the proper statistic baseline to be installed. We need accountability for, like VAERS right now. You're not encouraged to report things to VAERS when it's your legal responsibility as a clinician. When you give a product, a vaccine product, it's your responsibility to report problems to VAERS. From 2020 on, they did not. In fact, hospitals even tried to, quell anybody from doing that, and that's illegal. So when you have the actual thing in place to survey these things, and when you're not using them, and then when you do use them, the statistics and the innards involved literally work against you to bury and mask and adulterate the adverse events that are being reported so you don't see the safety signals.
Right.
That is a fundamental problem that needs to be addressed by our Congress, by our agencies. We need, I mean, Europe has, yellow card. There are other places that do it properly, and we're not, and that is unacceptable.
Well, that's a great final thought from you, Lynn. Unless you have one more final thought, and then I'll bounce to Dr. Lindley for a final thought, because again, I know we all have a lot of, it's been a busy week. I mean, between the executive order, the approval of the mRNA, and then the
And
Fauci
Fauci,
drama.
the committee voted to hold him in contempt. So there's
Contempt,
that.
yeah. So, I mean, busy week, lots of conversations being had, a lot of hope from, I think, a lot of people going forward now that things are being exposed to the degree, well, to a small degree. There's a lot more to come. But final thought, Lynn, and then we'll bounce to Kat, and then I know Kelly will have plenty of questions from the audience and some announcements. Lynn, first.
Just my final thought is for you to stand up for yourself. It's so easy to be coerced by when it's just you and your physician in a closed room. It's so easy to be coerced into something because you're by yourself and you feel vulnerable. But those days are over. That trust has to be earned again.
Mhm.
Stand up for yourself. Ask the questions. Why do I need this? What are the safety issues involved? Ask. And if you don't get the answer you want, get the package insert from him and say, I'll get back to you.
Great idea. Dr. Lindley?
I just want to remind everyone that you're in the driver's seat, right? If you don't agree with your physician, you find someone that you agree with. And the same thing, like I said, the AAP is going to recommend what they do recommend, but once parents start leaving their practices, I think they're going to have to change their ways. So the most important thing is stand up for yourself and your family and take care of yourselves. And also, this is my new puppy. His name is Teddy Bear. So Teddy Bear and I are going to get a snack, and we hope all of you join us in 10 minutes or next for a space. Lynn has a lot of guests lined up, so it should be fun.
I thought I did. Some of them can't make it because I had to move the time because of this webinar, but we'll see.
Well,
We'll see who
they're going to
shows
get
up.
us, Lynn. That's okay.
Well, thank you, ladies, for joining us tonight, and thanks for your insights and your wisdom and thoughts, and all of you that can join us over there on X in a little bit. I've got another channel to do for a few minutes, but I'll join you over there in a bit as well. Thank you. Have a great X Space. See you there. And we'll turn it over to Kelly now, because I know Kelly's tired too. International travels as well. So
Yeah, Ryan and I are both kind of recovering from a
we
big
are.
medical conference in Indonesia that we'll do a recap on in a couple weeks here.
Yeah.
Ryan, I noticed that Dr. Weissman is in our
Oh,
is in
yeah.
the back of our green room here. So it's going to see he's got his hands up. So I think he's got a question. So we're going to put him on screen with us and have Dr. Weissman ask a question, and then I'll go into
Wonderful.
mine.
Dr.
So what do
Weissman,
you
great to
have,
see
Dr.
you, my
Weissman?
friend. Go for
Well,
it.
hi. Hi. Was that Amanda? Who was that? I just got a text from Amanda.
Mhm.
Well,
You're,
actually, all I wanted, I was just jumping in on the conversation, so it's not really a question, but I don't know if you want to log off now, so we can transfer this over to the Twitter Spaces. But I had some comments on the
please go
various
right
issues.
ahead, David. Go right ahead.
I think just I'll just pick one really important one because we could spend a zillion hours as Ryan and I have done numerous times, but let's leave it to about 30 seconds. On the pregnancy question, so you mentioned, Ryan, in the text and in the different emails and so on and so forth, we've seen that there were concerns raised by different people early in 2021 about different aspects of could these vaccines affect pregnancy in various ways, and they were certainly theoretical. I don't think there was actual evidence at that moment, but there was enough that there was cause for concern. I want to point out one set of emails that came from Drew Weissman, who was no relation, who was one of the co-winners of the Nobel Prize for these sort of inventions related to these vaccines, and he communicated data to eventually got to Anthony Fauci, saying he'd done some mouse experiments that suggested, I think, that the vaccine either got into the placenta, across the placenta. And when you look at that particular email or the thread of emails, there was obviously some concern, some noise raised, and it was sort of being dismissed. Well, the studies aren't all that robust, and they could be explained this way and that way, all the usual sort of obfuscating kinds of language. But this was Drew Weissman. He was one of the winners of the Nobel Prize, and even he is being sort of dismissed and marginalized by Anthony Fauci and others. So you have all these things that are going on, and then about March or somewhere like that, I think Senator Johnson posted it on his Twitter last couple of days, or someone did. You have the clip of Rachel Walensky saying, "Oh yeah, the CDC recommends. We don't have any evidence that there's harm or any safety concerns. We have no evidence about the safety concerns. So we do recommend that the pregnant people use the vaccine." So I just want to point out, with that background, there were two studies. So while the CDC was saying all this, they had initiated or were about to initiate two studies. And I'm going to read you, and you can look up, and we can send the links later on. But I'm just going to read you like two sentences. The first study was initiated on April the 28th, 2021, and this was a CDC-sponsored study. And part of the preamble to the study reads as follows: 2 COVID mRNA vaccines are now available in the United States, and the first adenovirus vaccine was just approved under the EUA rules. And pregnancy is not a contradiction to vaccination. As such, there is an urgent need for outcome data following use of COVID-19 vaccines in pregnant populations. So that was the study April the 28th, and there was a related study that started a couple of months later with very, very similar language. So I just want to read that last sentence again to you. As such, there is an urgent need for outcome data following use of COVID-19 vaccines. So on the one hand, they're clearly saying, oh yeah, there's no concern, we don't have any data yet. But privately, in these studies that they're initiating, they're saying there's an urgent need to study this. Well, which one is it? Either we're sure or we're not sure. You can't initiate a study with the premise that there's an urgent need to study safety, and at the same time tell everyone, go ahead and use it.
Exactly.
I mean, that's ridiculous.
Dr. Weissman, we were just sharing that. We had Dr. Kim Biss, very courageous OBGYN, one of the only in the nation that was speaking out,
right.
Going back 4 years ago, Dr. Cole. And we just did a great video with her, and we posted that on our X. The team will post it in the chat as well. And she did a great job, as you did, identifying some of the studies.
I think I was the one that sent her that information
as well that we just posted.
Thank you for doing that, Dr. Weissman. Yeah. Because
and I want to point out an additional aspect to that is that those studies, and I'm not sure if it applied to both of them, but certainly one of them, they got an exemption from the IRB, the Institutional Review Board, the ethics committee that sort of regulates clinical trials. They got an exemption to not have to do informed consent because it wasn't an interventional randomized kind of study where people are coming in and there's a coin toss and you get this treatment or that treatment. So because it wasn't an interventional type of study, there was no quote unquote ethical concern. But if you remember, basically people were being coerced in various ways, right, to get the vaccines. And their excuse was, well, we're just going to see whoever comes through the door, and the ones that had vaccines we're going to put in this group, and the ones that happen not to have vaccines we're going to put in that group. So we're off the hook. We haven't intervened here, and so we don't have to administer informed consent. But yes, by virtue of the fact that you're forcing people, you're coercing people in various ways to take these vaccines, essentially what you are doing, and I'm going to say this very, very clearly, because this is about one of the most sickening things you could ever hear, is that they were conducting a medical experiment on people without their consent.
Yep.
Right? They were coercing people to participate in a medical experiment they didn't even know they were in.
Right.
Right?
Well, and with the most vulnerable, pregnant women and the impact it can have, obviously on the babies.
So, I mean, if that does, among the many things that, we're all concerned about, and there's many, I mean, that comes very high on the list for me.
Absolutely.
And so people need to understand that and join those dots together.
Yes.
Because this is outrageous. We conduct, and they say, well, this guy didn't know and that guy didn't know. So maybe they weren't all talking to each other and sort of conspiring to make this happen. But in aggregate, right, that's what happened. But effectively, whether or not they were actually talking to each other, well, you say this and we'll say that and we'll say this other thing, right? But in aggregate, that's what happened. All right.
And that's such a great observation.
And as a result, families and mothers lost children.
Right. They lost a future
and that's just
generation.
in that one area. We know there's much bigger impact. So this is horrific.
But even if we all agree for a moment and say, there was no in the end. Let's say in the end there was no effect on safety. Let's say that happened. Let's say that was true. All right. It still doesn't matter. All right. The point was that a medical experiment was conducted on people who were coerced in various ways to participate in an experiment they didn't even know they were in, without being made aware of the risks that were known or conceived of at the time.
Violating so many international codes.
Violating so many things. Exactly. Anyway, that's my 2 cents worth. You got plenty.
Thank you for that. That's such a good clarifying point.
Thanks for jumping on tonight. I think it's a critical issue. I know we're getting short on time, and Ryan, I want to be cautious because I know you have actually an interview that you're going to do for IMA as well coming up. So maybe I'll run through a couple quick questions.
Sure.
It was great to have Dr. Weissman on. One thing is that there was a number of questions about this. Trump EO proposes that they split up the MMR vaccinations, but that could take a year or two for that to happen. So, do you have any thoughts or any
I,
knowledge
I think
on
it's a great
that?
idea. It's an option in many European nations to do single shots. And, you know, the pediatrician that complains about that may say, well, gosh, they're not going to come back for each one of those. Well, it gives the patient the option to decide which one's most important for them.
Right.
And some of these are they used to be single shots prior to 1986, and they were available as single shots. Some of those companies, because of liability issues, pushed for the 1986 Act, and then these were consolidated into, one shot. I think it's a great idea because it gives the patient more choice, and at the same time, decreases the risk profile for the recipient.
The question is, how long is it going to take for that to be
It,
available
well,
US
if we
wise?
follow some of the European studies, it's already been done. It's already doable. So it's just a matter of, for example, the remdesivir studies, we relied on data from other nations. Many FDA approved products rely on data from other nations. So it's just a matter of allowing for that. And if you already look at what's available in other places that are developed nations with great scientific communities, then you don't have to drag it out for a year or two. You can go to data sets that already exist.
Oh, and outside of the data, I think people are asking, when would the single shots be available, for parents to ask for that or for pediatricians to use? And probably an issue working through all this with the reimbursements and
Sure.
insurance and all those things as well,
Yeah,
right? I would
I
think.
don't know,
I don't think we know all the answers to all these things, but since people are asking, I thought we would at least address that.
the short answer I have for that is, what is an elephant? Well, it's very simple. It's a mouse built to government standards. So, when you try to get a new policy or whatnot in place at a federal level, it does take a long time. We can hope it gets expedited based on the EO. Time will tell.
Well, then, related to the mRNA flu shot, Tom asked, do we know if anyone's begun thinking of any therapeutics to detox potential impacts of the mRNA flu shot?
Well, hopefully, those who are wise enough won't get it. And we're still playing Russian roulette with this flu shot. You're still guessing at three strains, putting it in there, and hoping you're covering whatever strain is coming in the future. So even at that, with as inefficacious as previous flu shots have been, there's no guarantee this will even cover what's circulating and out there. And why put yourself at risk for detoxing, quote, detoxing? You can't detox once a gene has hijacked your cells and has implanted itself within cellular machinery. You can't. The body can, quote, methylate and turn off those genes over time, hopefully, but not in everybody. So I think the best solution is prevention, and the best prevention is not accepting any mRNA shots going forward.
Ellen and actually a couple of folks asked about shedding. We know about shedding and the impact from the COVID vaccine. Do we know anything about the mRNA flu vaccine and potential shedding?
Well, of course, those studies haven't been done yet, but the probabilities are there based on even Pfizer's own data when they submitted their EUA submission to for the COVID mRNA products. They said, hey, if you're pregnant, don't even be in skin contact or in the same room with anybody that's had the injection for up to a month. So that's an admission of shedding there. We know that you can breathe it out in little packets that our cells release called exosomes. So those, for up to 4 months following these injections. So the probability of shedding the flu proteins from the surface of the flu, highly probable. We know from great Japanese studies that it shows up in the sweat glands. The spike protein did from the COVID shots.
Yeah.
Same thing is going to show up in the sweat from these shots as well. This is genetic product making your cells make a protein that's foreign. The shedding will happen. So again, that's the unethical point of all of this, is those that choose to get it are putting others at risk by getting it.
All right, a final question. And since we've got a Richard that asked if I could ask Dr. Cole if you're familiar, anything about the work with a German Dr. Arnie Burkhardt, which I know you do, that passed a couple years ago, and he was looking to determine if people died from the virus or the vaccine. He heard that you were doing something similar. Is there anything you can speak to identify the work that you're doing to identify if someone's death was specifically linked to the COVID vaccine?
Yeah, that's what I was working on in parallel with him. He was a great man, a great friend, hero of mine, great mentor, and God rest his soul, just a beautiful, beautiful human being. And he was a great loss. He did transfer all of his data sets to me presciently a month before his own passing when we were in Geneva together. Or no, we were in Brussels. And he's like, Ryan, do you have your computer? And he handed all his data sets to me, which was a blessing. I don't have my lab anymore, so I'm just doing occasional case reviews, with all the legal challenges I've gone through for telling the truth. The studies I'm working on have been limited because of that, unfortunately, but I can confirm and look at the data that others are producing and tell you whether or not it's good data. There are techniques, and I'll just keep teaching it. There are techniques to do it, and it's just the willingness to look for what's out there. And I just continue to hope that independent scientists continue to put efforts in these directions.
Well, thank you for that update. I know that we talked about the X space, and then there's a lot to talk about this. So some folks may want to jump over there. We did post it in the chat for folks, but it's on Dr. Finn's X space. So we've got that posted in the chat if people want to share that. And then right now, I'm just going to go in and look for closing statements right now. So thank you for everything tonight.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Kelly.
Okay. All righty. Okay, one thing after talking about tonight and the questions that many have on childhood immunizations, IMA did update with Dr. Mumper the new Parent's Guide to Childhood Immunizations. And I saw a number of questions in our chat. What can you do? What information can we pass along? It's a great resource. You can see the URL her geni.us/immunizations dash guide. And this is a great resource to go through all the immunizations and the pros and cons and options, as well as other resources that parents and family can read through as well. And then the next area that we have is IMA, and we're working on actually evolving this into a full Parents Hub Center. Our team is working really hard, and that should be coming soon. But our Smart Moms Ask Resource Center has a lot of great resources as it relates to the COVID vaccine for both children and pregnant women. So that issue is just coming up again because, as we know, many people are still getting this vaccine and not aware of the risk. So we've had our whole bench of pediatricians and experts that have given short videos that can be shared, and we have a whole area for Q&A. So please go check that out too. It's at imahealth.org/smart moms ask and explore it yourself. And then next week, we have Dr. Joe Verone and Dr. Josef Witt-Doring, and they're going to be on to talk about benzodiazepines and sleep. So you won't want to miss that. That'll be standard time Wednesday at 7 p.m. And they'll break down the risk, dependence, concerns, and safer questions to ask about sleep and anxiety treatment. And then today we're actually launching a new $250,000 match campaign to hopefully help IMA raise $500,000. And one thing that we've launched as a result of our recent conference that we had was IMA Academy. So now we have 15 lectures that professionals can earn 12 continuing medical education credits, and they're available to anyone for open access. Even if you're a patient or family member and just want to learn, these are all available at the URL here, imahealth.org. Actually, go /academy. They're available at academy.imahealth.org. And if you want to support this initiative, we've got the URL on the screen. We've got two amazing family behind this, Nick and Dee Adams, that have done a great job in putting up this fund to help us as an organization raise money to create more series. We actually are in the process of developing a cancer care 12-part series right now that we hope to launch by the end of the year. And this kind of fund would help us create even more series as well that are available for both independent physicians and patients alike. And then as I tee up the close of the show tonight, and we went a little bit long, we've got Dr. Ron Elfenbein, who we had as a recent guest, and he's going to talk a bit about the Fauci Senate testimony and the larger question of accountability. That's just getting more real every day with the release of new files. So go ahead and let's check out what Dr. Elfenbein has to say. Thank you all for joining tonight. We appreciate it.
Last week, Fauci took the fifth, 111 times. Yes, he needs to be held accountable for what he did. Absolutely awful what he did. But he's not the only one. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Ron Elfenbein. I'm a board certified Johns Hopkins trained emergency medicine doctor who had the Biden administration weaponized, the Department of Justice weaponized against me. I was very active during COVID, and I was given awards actually by our governor and our state legislature for my work during COVID. Personal citations from both of those entities, and the Medical Society named me its Person of the Year, and the federal government indicted me. I ran the state of Maryland's largest monoclonal antibody infusion centers, and actually, to my knowledge, the entire region, the Mid-Atlantic region of the United States. We had patients coming from all over the country because they could not get monoclonal antibodies. In my opinion, had we gone down the pathway of treating patients that were sick, we did not need to shut the world down. We did not need to tank our economy. We did not need to consign children to not go to schools for 2 years. We did not need to have all this rise in mental health problems and alcoholism and all the other horrible things that happened because of these terrible decisions made by the people in power at the time. That the only route we could do was vaccinate, universal vaccination. Nobody would talk about anything else. Anyway, I was indicted on federal healthcare fraud charges that even the chief judge of the state of Maryland adjudicating my case in a pretrial conference called the prosecution a case of, quote, shoot first and ask questions later. That is a direct quote from a United States federal judge about the prosecution coming after me. I took it to trial because I did nothing wrong, and the same judge issued this who's the chief judge of Maryland, by the way, the chief federal judge, issued this 93-page opinion, completely acquitting me of all charges and guaranteeing me a new trial in case of appeal. Well, the Biden administration chose to appeal at the last possible second, shortly before Trump was inaugurated. And now I face a second criminal trial for the same charges that I've already been through this once. I will tell you, looking back last week, Fauci took the fifth, 111 times. Yes, he needs to be held accountable for what he did. Okay. He was the mouthpiece. He was front and center. He was providing advice to people. Absolutely awful what he did. But he's not the only one. And he had no real position of power. He was not in a position of authority or power. Well, he wasn't in a position of authority. Didn't have any power. The governors, the principals of the schools that foisted this upon us, the county executives that foisted this upon us, all those people in positions of actual authority that had actual power, these petty tyrants shut the world down and caused all these problems on us. They need to be held accountable as well. It's not just Anthony Fauci. Yes, he needs to be held accountable, but there's so many other people, all these people in the media, that parroted all the nonsense. These people need to be held accountable because they're the ones that actually enacted all this stuff. Please go to my website, dropthecase.com. There's lots of information there. And again, we need to hold these people accountable because none of this needed to happen. We did not need to go down that pathway where the world was shut down, where our kids were kept out of schools, where millions of people died. None of that needed to happen. Thank you very much.